Welcome to the HR Huddle. It's great to have so many people with us again. Today we're discussing trust and how to rebuild teams so our people work together effectively to improve business performance in these unique and very challenging times. I think it's important for us to realise how we handle this moment in time will define how our people and how our customers think about our organisations. And it's essential that we think ahead to the longer term implications of furlough, of people working from home in isolation and business restructures. So I'm thrilled to say that we're joined by Ravenscroft, lead performance coach for Gateway HR and Olympic coach, to discuss what we need to do to rebuild trust, rebuild teams and employee engagement in a post-COVID-19 world. Any questions you've got as we go along, please do put them in the chat box, because we're happy to take live questions and answer them. But Graham, welcome and thank you for joining us again, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience on this hot topic.
Great to be asked back. It's always a good thing to be asked back. So let's hope that we're equally as entertaining today. But it's good to be with you all, Eloise.
I'm sure you'll be. Yeah, I'm sure you will be. So will you start, Graham, with reminding us of the purpose of teams and how they work effectively?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can share a slide here, can't I?
Yeah.
Just literally a little older. I'm going to try and be all clever when I'm just so an IT. So I need to thank Emma for helping me work this out. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah, good. I mean, there's a little definition there really I think, which hopefully a picture paints 1,000 words, and so I did less than 1,000 words for sure while that picture's there. I think, when we're thinking about people coming back and we're thinking about re-establishing teams, I'm sure back in the workplace, that was an incredibly difficult time. I think sometimes we felt it was important just to remind ourselves of the purpose in the first place. And, the reason we put a team together is because we don't want to limit the performance of what we do by one person's brilliance or one person's knowledge or skill. So we actually create teams where we get a group of people, we bring them together, and then hopefully we get them working in a highly efficient way where they're working to one common goal and they're using their own personal skills and experience to help achieve it. That's a brief summary. Did you want? Sorry, go on.
No. So from your perspective, and then there's a lot around teams, isn't it? And teams can be all kind of shapes and sizes. What do you think are the key characteristics of a really high performing team?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put some stuff up here in a minute. So just to share with you where some of this has come from, my personal experience in teams, for those of you who don't know, in 2017, I retired from the fire service after 30 years of operational experience. Yeah, so 9 o'clock in the morning on the 2nd of September-ish was the day that I walked away. No, fantastic career, yeah, and I think I was in the pub at 10 o'clock, but it was a good day, most what I remembered. Obviously, so my experience working with teams there, and of course the last 10 years of that were in management, and of course, so I stayed on the fire engines for the right reasons and personal reasons. But of course, what I'm doing there is you're looking very much, so there's a great example, I think, of where you bring individuals into the place of work. You have a whole set of potential skills that you need not every single person to be good at, but the team needs to be covering that in every single base. So obviously my role was to introduce those skills, to teach those skills, but then to create an environment as a leader and as a coach where people had the opportunity in a safe place to develop those skills, to get it wrong, to learn from it in a non-critical environment. And I think one of the common mistakes in developing high performance in teams, and I've had this discussion with senior leaders, is that they send somebody on a course and there's an assumption they're going to come back with the right skills. But of course, that's not the way it is. When we go on a course, with all respect to the best courses out there, the best teachers, we come back at what we call a point of acquisition. So we merely acquire some knowledge and a basic introduction of the skill. But the role of the leaders within the team is to create an environment where people are exposed and have the opportunity to then develop those skills, to apply them in a practical way to be skillful. Okay, and then of course there's this idea that it's made up of so many individuals that of course, part and parcel of the bit is that then you bring in personalities, you bring in different, learning abilities, the way people learn. And of course, that needs to be managed too. I'm just going to share with you on the screen here. There's a couple, and drop in the chat if you wanted to ask a question, or maybe me talk with Eloise a little bit more about one in particular. If not, I'll probably just hit a few. This is by no means a definitive list, but like I said there, I didn't give it all. So, I digressed a little bit on fire service. Thank you. We'll have a look. So when you look at, sorry, just let me open that. So when you look at my time in the fire service, there's an example. But what I've also done and spent a lot of time doing is traveling with British teams. So as Eloise said, I would have been in Tokyo now, and we'll just have to wait till next year. Quite looking forward to visiting. But of course, my job as a performance coach in that sort of world is to help create and maintain an environment where high-performing people can come together and have the opportunity to actually deliver that best performance in that moment. And that environment needs creating in the first place, and then it needs managing effectively. I think, it's no good me getting busy in my busyness, or business leaders saying that I'm too busy. That is the responsibility at that level, I think, to make sure that you maintain that environment. So here's a couple of things that help define, I think, some of the commonality that exists in characteristics with high-performing teams. And so, over the last 12 months, I've worked with a senior international sports team. I won't say rugby for the right reasons, but somebody like that. I've worked with a helicopter squadron in Oxford, and of course lots and lots of businesses from senior leadership teams all across industries, from distribution, manufacturing, etc. So this is a collection of stuff that I see as ever present. I just thought I'd share it with you. So we've got teams, and then we've got high performing teams. I think one of the bits may or may not surprise you, I don't know, but if I do a dozen to 20 team days of a kind per year, then 100% of the time, and I get that's a big statement and a big figure, but it doesn't matter how successful the team is and how well they're doing, 100% of the time, communication comes up as an area for concern. I don't know whether people find that the same. It's
yeah. When I've been during the last 3 to 4 months, I've been speaking to business owners and lots of HR people. And actually, one of the biggest flags that they've said, and something that they've been concerned about, is there hasn't been enough communication in the teams. And actually, by people working remotely, that makes communication even more difficult.
It does here, and so everybody that I've worked with, every business leader that I've spoke to said there's actually a bit of a clue in the title here. It's called isolation. And I think you have to remember that, your workers, the people that are delivering the performance for you, are in isolation. They're detached from everybody. They're detached from the premise. They're detached, from the communication. Now, those that have done it well, and I say those that have done it well, there really is a common theme that they have found a new level of communication. They've rediscovered the importance of effective communication. Because instead of taking it for granted, where you can just look up and ask the question, instead of seeking the information in a split second, you might get 1 or 2 contacts, if you're lucky, per day. And what they've done is they've really made sure that they've structured it. There's much more clarity around the communication. So I think that's, one of the reasons. Those that have got it well, I think have certainly learned a lot about what good looks like. And I think maybe those that have got it very wrong have still got a bit of a bad day to come. Yeah, that's what I would suggest. Obviously, people, if you've got more people together, more ideas, more innovation, then you're likely to have better problem solving. Obviously, the range of skills, in high performance, what you tend to get is a much greater depth of skill. And I talked about their sort of high performance leadership. Is it the same? Is it different? Listen, I would say it's very different. And the reason I say that is when you're working with really high performing people and you've got highly skilled, highly experienced people, the potential for conflict, not in fisticuffs, but in the way you're thinking and your decision making, is even greater because they're absolutely sure about why they want to do things the way they do it. And of course, you know, so it's about high performing leaders know how to manage conflict effectively, avoid it in the first place. So I think there's stuff like that. Culture, there's a great one. What does culture mean to everybody? It's
well, we all talk a lot about culture, don't we, and how great our cultures are.
Yeah.
And I think probably this has put a lot of cultures to the test.
Yeah. And people, and you know, they may find new ways of working as a direct result of this. I think what would be very wrong here is to come back or just divert straight back to an old norm without just taking a breath and really identifying what potentially is good by this. And I don't mean people staying away. I mean, we work together in an office for the right reasons very often. But of course, that will be decisions that people have to make. But of course, culture for me is just defining the way we do stuff, the way it's done around here, the way we behave, the consistent approach to processes, methods, and as I say, behaviors. If you've been on a workshop with me before, I'm not sure whether it's probably linked to this, but certainly when I talk about teams, I would always ask you if you want to learn stuff about the importance of culture, I would direct you to the All Blacks. I think they're an incredible example of how culture defines the long-term success of arguably the most successful team in history, in sport and in business. We're talking 115 years of success here with an 86% win rate, which is quite incredible. You put it in perspective, there are more people in central London, well, maybe not today, or certainly on a normal day, whatever normal looks like. There are more people in central London each day than there is in that entire country. And yet, you know, they're pretty much dominant. And a lot of within the book, which is called Legacy, it's an author called James Kerr. It's actually, you don't need to be a rugby fan. It's 15 Lessons for Business.
Great book, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great book. 15 Lessons for Business. And a lot of what they talk about is the culture, but the culture in that team isn't just about the rugby and the team. It's actually, it comes from the actual nation and the people within it. And I think it's a super example of how culture can work for you. So I think at a time like that now, it's really important to understand what a high-performing culture looks like. To that end, everybody, what I would say is when I start working with an organization, one of the questions I ask the leadership is I ask them, do they know, could they define what is driving their culture? And you might be surprised to hear, or not surprised to hear, that very few could just comfortably define that. Why is that so important? Because culture, for me, has to be managed. And how do we manage something that we don't know what it is? So I think, you know, if we're doing things a way we do it, are we doing it just because that's the way we do it around here? Because that's the way we've always done it around here? And of course, there's a danger of doing that because the world around you is moving. And in the essence of bottom line or public service or whatever business you're in, it's about the end user and it's about raising the performance level of what you do for the end user. So I think, yeah, go on.
That's the ideal time to where everything's up in the air, isn't it, Graham? You know, now's the ideal time if you want to change the culture and develop a winning culture. When you're bringing your teams back together, now's the time to be doing it.
Well, it is, and I know we're going to talk about in this next period or whatever we're going to sit here talking is I've obviously some ideas about how you do that, and we'll do it all in order. But you know, make sure we do that before we finish. That we actually. So I'm just conscious. Just one sec that I put down. Can you just monitor the questions for me if there is one, because it just disappeared off my screen, and I just don't want to miss a question. If
no, that's right. Rhiannon asked what HP leadership is, but I think that's
sorry,
high performance leadership.
Yeah, it is high performance. That's fine. So that's what I would say. Absolutely, it's a great time, and I think we should revisit and remind ourselves now and again what it is that actually drives our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Or what's drives? Is it someone? Is it a process? And actually, if it's not working for us, then of course we need to manage it out. If it is working for us, we need to manage it through consistency onwards and make sure everybody works to that sort of, the way we do stuff.
Great. So they're the characteristics of generally high performing teams.
Yeah, there's a few.
What's the importance of trust within teams, Graham?
Again, I sort of took the opportunity to just stick this on. I don't know whether has anybody seen this? It's Lencioni's model of 5 dysfunctions of a team. And I believe this totally, which is why I thought it was a good one to remind you today. Because what is it about us trainers? We love a little triangle, don't we? It's mad, but there you go. But what this does for me is it defines the reality, and that is I genuinely myself personally believe that everything about your team and your performance and your organization is actually underpinned by this idea of trust. And I think in the absence of trust, as it suggests there, then of course you're going to find all the problems above it. What does it mean? I think we should be focusing on delivering sort of measurable results, as it says there. Remind yourself, what does a goal do for you? What's the purpose in the first place? All right, and it gives us motivation to do something, doesn't it? It gives us direction. It allows us to hone our efforts. It allows us to be purposeful in the way we choose to work and all those things. So it's important to do that. And in order to achieve that, we need to promote this idea of accountability across the entire organization. And too often, I see a lack of accountability. Now, when that's absent in it, we'll come to this, obviously, because this snowballs, of course, and it will all be underpinned by trust ultimately. But I think it's really important that you have that accountability. It's okay that we don't have a no-blame culture in the sense that, if we make a mistake, we don't want to be publicly humiliated or flogged for it. It's not about that. But I actually do need people, if they've made a mistake, to just shout out immediately so we can limit the damage, we can learn from it and move on. But if you've not got accountability, then I think you've got an organizational problem, much as you've got a personal problem. Okay, so just one thing to really seriously think about there. But in order to have that, of course, you need this idea of full commitment. You need the buy-in. You need every single person in your team to understand what it is that this is about. And they need to be able to challenge it. You need to create this psychological safe zone in the workplace within your team where people are free to question it, challenge it. Because if you answer all these questions and you encourage people to do that, then you're more likely to get the buy-in. You're more likely going to get people wanting, all right, and committing to you, to being who you want to be in the cause. At the end of the day, you will have conflict because people come through the door every day. People come through every day with different ideas, different personality, different working ethics, different ambition, all these things. So it's about basically creating an environment of healthy conflict where people are free to challenge and you're free to challenge back. But just to finish here, and then please, Eloise, any more, that's why I think trust is fundamentally important. Now, I find myself sounding old-fashioned when I say I genuinely feel, I shouldn't be that way, it's mad that I think that way, but I genuinely think we have one opportunity of real trust. Now, bridges can definitely be built, but I give that some thought. We are going to talk about, I'm going to share some thoughts in a minute about how we rebuild trust, because things will happen. But I would urge people to consider, what are the foundations, and I'm going to give you some of that in a minute from research, but I would urge you to consider how we establish trust in the first place and the importance of never breaking it. And I have to say, as a performance coach, one can only imagine the amount of people that I talk to and the stuff I get told. And it's more important than any penny I ever earn. It's more important than any credibility that I absolutely, that, you know, people can trust me 100%. And of course they do, and they can. So that's why it's so important to me. And I see it in the absence of trust. I think everything above it that you and all your teams will want, then you've got to compromise for me.
I agree with you, Graham. I think once you can rebuild trust, but it's so much more difficult, and time consuming than if we haven't lost it in the first place. But you know, unfortunately, I don't think anybody saw, you know, the pandemic, or most business people didn't see the pandemic coming.
No.
You know, we didn't foresee that people would be working from home in isolation or working remotely for so long, and obviously all the other repercussions and things that have happened over the last 3 to 4 months. So we are in a situation where, well, yeah, we are where we are, unfortunately, where teams have been pulled apart. Some people have been working, some people haven't, you know, and quite often through no fault of any business, you know, trust has been lost. So, but which is why today's discussion was so important about how we can rebuild things. So moving on, how do you think we can rebuild trust between co-workers in particular and teams?
Yeah, okay. I mean, just before I move on, I'd bring up on your point. It's a really good point, and it shouldn't get missed or lost that, you know, COVID's come along and done to us all. It was certainly, I would imagine, I hope so, in our lifetimes, and all that's left, and certainly before us, been absolutely unprecedented set of circumstances globally, not just nationally or locally. And of course, it won't be COVID, and it may not be to the same scale, but what we have to remember here is that when we're on the journey to greatness, or whatever that looks like, and developing ourselves, there will always be situations and circumstances that are beyond our control, that we have absolutely no say over, no control over, and of course cause us to halt our steps, can cause us to behave differently, think differently, you know, take stock, work in a different way. But I think I just want to remind people, the most important thing for me to point out and remind everybody of is we will always own 100% of our own personal attitude to that set of circumstances. And it's just so important, all right? And I just feel, because it's about how we react. And one thing we didn't talk about, sorry to just tell me if you want to move on, but you just reminded me about the previous slide, and we didn't talk about resilience. And it's a word, of course, that is, you know, used a lot. And I think it's understanding what resilience actually is and what it means in order for us to be resilient and display resilience. And by the way, it's an absolutely fundamental component of high performance in individuals and in business. And of course, those that will be successful post-pandemic, and during and post, will have had to display a great level of resilience. And I was listening to somebody the other day online, and I'm going to nick this quote. Why wouldn't you? Because that's what we do. And I didn't know it, but apparently it was Muhammad Ali that once described the difference between robustness and resilience, and I really liked it. And he said, we develop robustness so that we don't get knocked down, but we develop resilience so that we get back up. Yeah, absolutely. What a great share. And I thought, so it wasn't me, it was a guy on a workshop. I'm trying to think who, for a business owner, but it just shared it. But apparently Muhammad Ali. But I just think, you know, now's the time to remember that and take stock. And as we move forward in this conversation now, and we talk about rebuilding trust, I just wanted to touch, you know, that base so that we have that as the lead and underpin what we're going to talk about here.
Yeah,
because we've had to display great resilience in the sense that we've all took a knock from day one, in the sense that we can no longer do what we do the way we do it. So we've had to basically take stock. We've had to go again. We've had to think of new ideas. You know, we've lost people. We can't see them, and all this stuff. Right. So with that in mind, I think the best way to answer your question, and obviously thank you for sort of giving me a bit of a theme. So we've been quite lucky so far with my little, it's my last slide, but I just want to put some together to sort of help you, and of course share them by all means. How do you rebuild trust? There is I think it's a super TED Talk. I don't know whether people look at TED Talks. That you know, some great ones and not so great. I really enjoyed this, and it reminded me when we were talking, Eloise, about the topic and what people were thinking about. And I just thought this was the prize catch for everybody. And it's really simple because there's only 3 points. So I wanted to sort of share this thinking. So Francis Frey is obviously a Harvard Business School lecturer. Was basically talking about exactly this subject. So again, let's not try and reinvent the wheel. I mean, I think she puts it beautifully, so I wanted to share it with you. And it's on a TED Talk. How do we create trust in the first place? What are the elements, again, that because we talked about the importance of it in Lencioni's model, and we can see that it underpins all the other stuff that we need, but actually, how do we create it? So there are 3 fundamental areas which we're going to share. And this is the first one. She said it's about being authentic. And I think what I understand by that is when you're given a message, and again, we're going to be having conversations with people that are coming back to work, or people aren't coming back to work, or some tough ones. Maybe people are going to be made redundant. Maybe, there's some really tough conversations that people are going to have right now. And I think make sure that we do it in a consistently authentic way, as in don't try and wrap it up, don't try and present it as somebody else. If you want somebody to trust you, I think you need to be authentic in the delivery of that, in the conversations, in the emotion that underpins it, in the behavior that you choose to deliver that message. Okay, so absolutely be yourself. Don't try and be somebody else, and because of the situation or the set of circumstances or the severity of it, or the fear of how it might land. Yeah, be yourself. I completely agree.
Yeah.
The other one, of course, is to be logical, because it's a bit like it's no different to change management, is it? Or trying to implement change or do something like that. If we display logic within our reasoning, if we communicate effectively with clarity, the logic behind why we're doing this, and we have to, then we're more likely to get the trust that, or for the message to be trusted. It's when,
even if people don't agree with the decisions, they can see the logic in the thought process and where the business is going.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. That's the point that she's making, and the way I see it. So you imagine sitting in front of you, and actually all of a sudden you're not behaving as you. This isn't the person that I've known and seen and communicates like that. There's going to be some doubt straight away, I think, in the trust of what you're saying and what you're trying to say, or whether you're saying it as it is. So again, that's the authentic bit. And if you can explain the logic behind it with clarity, so that I can see why you're doing this, as you quite rightly say, Louise, I don't have to agree with it. I'm about to lose my job. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I can't argue with the logic behind it. So I think it's about, and if you can back that up factually, so that it's not based on opinion. There's another thing okay, so it's about fact, not opinion. And again, people see through inference all the time. People see through, it's really easy to see through. So where you can back up the logic with fact, all right, if you can evidence that, the logic, then people are going to trust it. And I think that's really, really important. Okay. And the last one is one of my favorites. I'm a personal coach myself. I've been a manager myself in a tough world, really, fire service, quite a tough world to manage. And I teach, of course, I'm an accredited trainer with the CMI, which we'll talk about just before we end today. And I think, I agree with social science that says continuously that empathy is the #1 emotional intelligence skill. And I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. What we're saying here is if we can be empathetic, and let's just spend a little bit of time talking about reminding ourselves what this is. This isn't sympathy. This isn't going, yeah, God, that must be difficult. and meaning it. This is a different level, isn't it? Empathy is about taking your time, and this might sound crazy, people, but to actually try and walk in that person's shoes for real, to take their steps, to actually see through their eyes. And at the highest possible level of emotional intelligence, it's to be able to feel their emotions. That's what real empathy is. People ask me all the time, is this sort of an innate skill? You know, are we born with it? Is it something we can learn? So my answer to that question is, just being a 54-year-old of quite a lot of worldly experience, I'm sure that a lot of people who display genuine empathy actually have it naturally in abundance through the development or process of their life. But this is without a doubt a skill that for me that can be learned, yes. But it requires a degree of commitment and application and time and recognizing when you get it wrong. Now, where does the trust come from? If you can start from a point of genuine empathy, so that you are thinking about their emotions, you're almost feeling like this is going to land. I'm about to tell somebody this. What does this actually mean? And by the way, if you've got 10 people to say the message to, you might need to say this 10 ways.
Yeah.
But from your authentic self in the same logical manner. But the reason I'm saying that is because it will land in 10 different ways potentially. And real empathy is about being able to understand and recognize how this might land in that individual person's way. Now, if we do that, and we can do that, aren't we more likely to say the right thing? Aren't we more likely to make the right decision? Are we not more likely to listen when we should listen?
Yeah.
No, please, yeah.
No, I was going to say, no, I think, you know, it's difficult, isn't it? Because as business leaders or in HR, when you're having conversations with people and needing to be using your empathy or be you obviously want to be very authentic, but also you know when you're representing the business, at times you might how you may be authentic in yourself may not necessarily be how the business wants you to be.
You've reminded me of I love directing people to sort of different things if they're interested. There's a guy, I'm just writing it down so when I'm talking I don't forget it, so it's all right. So, I actually went online and was introduced to a guy during lockdown, a fascinating young coach who's very annoying because he's just done the most incredible things and he's far too young to achieve it all. So I'm not sure how he's done it. But anyway, his name's Todd Hedman, and he wrote a book recently called Altered Ego. And I just got sent the free preface bit and I'm going to buy it. It's fascinating. But he was talking there about almost what you're saying is there's an us, isn't there? And then there's a role us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it's important that sometimes we recognize that. Now, if we can find ourselves in a role and a way of working and a job, lifetime, whatever, in something that reflects who we are, and I've got to be honest, I'm just saying for myself, I've got enough feedback to know that this is my perfect job now. This is who I am. I can just be myself and express my thoughts in a truly authentic way because I live by all these standards. And there's a couple of people on here, of course, that know who I am or work with me, and they can tell you it's just who I am, regardless of the situation. But I think what he was saying there, and I feel for HR and some of the situations that you're going to have, something that may help you is while you're being authentic, it's about your authentic work self. Now, what he meant by that is an altered ego is he looked at people in the sports field and then started to think of CEOs and top business leaders and top military leaders and the rest of it. When you think about how effective they are in role and their particular leadership style and why it needs to be that way, because leadership is very much situational. Sometimes it's a choice and people choose a particular style for a particular reason. That's their safe zone because of their lack of whatever it be. But if they're consistently that, what we're saying is that the same person that goes home, that goes back to manage wife, husbands, children? Yeah, in some cases, maybe, and I'm sure that'll be a rocky road. But actually, very often, we need to step over the work threshold, don't we? And then we need to step into an ego that allows us to be authentic consistently in a particular role to be effective in it. So it brings me to the point there of what you were saying, really consistency. I think you need to be consistent in the way that you're delivering a message. And that will affect trust. If you're giving a similar message, or you've got to give a similar message to more than one person, then again, that trust could easily be undermined or pinned if you've not given a consistent message, or if you've not been consistently authentic, or you've not been consistently logical. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Nancy summed it up far more eloquently than I did. She said it can be difficult to be authentic and show empathy when you yourself don't agree with the message but have to deliver it. And I think you've answered that, haven't you, in the fact that actually we can have our personal, authentic selves, and then we can have our professional, authentic selves. Nicole has asked, are there any negative implications for being overly empathetic?
Gosh, super question. Well, I definitely think there's implications to your own well-being and emotional self, for sure. Okay, let's bring that. Hopefully I'll answer that question, and please monitor the yes or no if I don't, and hold me to account. I think about the last two questions and bring them together. We talked about being our altered ego, as I say, and maybe that's not yourself, but consistently authentic within that ego that represents you within your role. So in answer to that over-empathetic, super point, I think the danger to being over-empathetic is that there's a chance that it will cloud your judgment in terms of what you're trying to say and do. So there's a need from a business point of view, and if you got that message to say, it may be that you don't agree with it. It may be that this is a really tough message. Now, the choice there really exists within being in role or not, I think. If that is the decision that's been made from a business point of view, then it's your job, unfortunately, or role to actually deliver that message. Now, when we allow ourselves to get emotionally attached, as you would do from a point of empathy, if we are over empathetic, then I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that it's not going to be a lot harder perhaps to deliver that message. So I think that's the answer to the question. There's a danger, but as you quite rightly said, I think the altered ego bit, I would remind yourself about that this isn't personal. This isn't about you being a horrible person that is picking on the person that's sitting in front of you. These are business decisions, and you're the person that's delivering the message. This is the logic behind it. And even if you don't necessarily think it was necessary, you've got to accept to a point, or well, you can challenge it all day, but when it gets to a point of delivering the message, I would just urge you to do all the things I've said, to be logical. The empathy will help you with the timing. I think it will help you with the support that you give. It will help you with the support during and after, but it shouldn't stop you delivering the agreed message. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, yeah, I think so. So, yes, so said yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm not following the chat for some reason. I had it and then it disappeared. So it's probably something I've done. So you're doing well. Keep me going. I'm not ignoring anybody that wants a question. I'm relying on Eloise. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Support for yourself. Support for yourself, people. At these times, I just talked about, in terms of empathy, I think, business leaders, business owners, it's a time for them to recognize you. It's a time for them and just remind them in their sort of busyness and their stressful situations that, for them to display, this is a time for them to be empathetic with you. When you're delivering really tough messages, you're going to require support, downtime, de-stressing. Maybe somebody sat with you, maybe somebody delivering a message in a difficult, whatever it be. just remind, don't be afraid to coach upwards here. Coach upwards, all right, or sideways. You need support too. Sorry, Eloise. I just thought
No, that's great. I was going to say, if you haven't got any more slides, Graham, would you
yeah.
unshare your screen so we can properly?
Yeah, we did. There we go. See everybody
again. So we talked about that's how you kind of rebuild trust. So how can we, not wanting to stay on a negative theme at all, but lots of businesses are restructuring and going through redundancy processes at the moment. How can we make sure, whilst when we're going through those processes, that we can retain the trust of the people?
Yeah, I mean, so again, I'm talking here from a business manager point of view, a development coach perspective, and I'm sitting, obviously, looking at absolute HR experts with far more experience than me in this field. But to give you my opinion, I mean, listen, I work in a world of absolute trust. People trust me sometimes with their lives. In the fire service, people trust me with their lives when I make decisions. And I tell them, yes, tell them. We don't have discussions. I've had to tell them to do things a particular way. So I can only, bring it up to that, and hopefully it will help answer the question. And the other things, with athletes and business people, that there's a trust in my experience. There's a trust in my questioning. So what I would say in answer to your question, when you're trying to maintain trust, one of the bits of advice that I spoke to a lot of leaders before I left the fire service and since, and one of the things they talked about, and I say this as humbly as I possibly can, was about my reputation before I left as a leader, which is very flattering and I say humbling before I left. And I never thought about it really. I said, I wish I'd have known that in my career, but it was sort of towards the end. It's probably because I was going. I don't know. But one of the things that come out was, I know it sounds repetitive, but the consistency. Now, what they meant as well, and I would say in answer to your question, is not just about the people that might be leaving, is it? It's just not just about the people that you're delivering that message to. There's a much bigger picture here. And it's about relationships that are built, and it's about the vulnerability of the people that are left. So I think I would say, in terms of that trust, recognize that in order for success to continue, in order for you to continue to have good quality communications, and trust underpins everything else, it's about how you manage the people that will remain. And it's about recognizing the massive impact to them physically and emotionally on and the vulnerability that they'll sense in, is it me next? Is it just a gap? You know what I mean? So you've got to I think you need to display equal empathy. I know that's, but I think you need to be equally as empathetic and understanding. And I think you need to provide exactly the same time, or more time indeed, potentially, with those that are left, because their trust could potentially be really wavering and undermined because of the decisions that they've seen you make.
And obviously that lack of, if there is that lack of trust, that will have an implication on how well teams work, how well the people work together in teams, and then ultimately the business performance, because how people are feeling will have a direct link to their performance within the business.
It does. And, we talk a lot, we're not touched on it really today, but I certainly talk a lot on the value of values. And I think it was quite interesting here that we've not touched on it. You just made me think there about how you choose to do something. Is I feel really precious about the value of values in a business. And I've seen it absolutely be the thing that underpins all the success. But I've seen it be the thing that unravels it, and it definitely compromises trust here. So, for example, if if we had a value that says respect or have empathy, and then through this process there's a clear demonstration of the opposite, then you're opening a proper can of worms for everybody that's left, aren't you? Do you see what I'm saying? So I think there needs to be we have values for a reason in our organizations. And the reason we have them is so that we can create a place where everybody, if everybody lives to our organizational values, then we can actually begin to predict one another's behavior. We can feel confident in the fact that when everybody picks up a phone, when everybody does a face-to-face, when everybody writes an email, that your brand will be represented in a particular way. Remember, these aren't personal values and behaviors, they're corporate values and behaviors. And I think that's the important thing to remember. So when we're in difficult times like this, we need to understand the reality of what affects behavior. And, again, if we want to drift into a conversation for another day, and I could do 4 if you really wanted me to, is understanding the human performance curve and how stress affects performance. Now, we're talking about a very stressful situation here, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what you've got to understand is pressure is very good for performance. The pressure response, if you get it right, is fantastic. It engages people. It makes them acutely aware and alert of the world around us through 360 degrees. Yeah, we've got high levels of enthusiasm, and then there's this tipping point. And the tipping point creates another response. It's called the stress response. And that actually creates through our reptilian brain and through our involuntary, completely involuntary, we're talking about a physiological, emotional, and behavioral adaptations that occur that pretty much give us zero control over our performance. So when we're delivering a message here, what we do need to do is make sure that we don't turn on that sympathetic nervous system. And the reason we need to consider pace, and the reason we need to consider the people that are staying, and when we bring people back, and the reason we need to get it right and think about language, because language matters, everybody. Language matters, and you need to think about how you're saying something, and the empathy side of it is how that's going to be heard. Now, again, do we know everybody's experience? So when I'm about to say something, if somebody else started a conversation with that which led to something negative, you could potentially turn on that sympathetic nervous system. I hope that made sense. So yeah, I mean, there's so many factors. I think be clear with the communication, as I say, be empathetic, be consistent, and remember, it's not just about the people that are going to get bad news. It's that perception of bad news, what you think is bad news. Losing a job, having to make redundancies, and you're part of that. I can't imagine that's ever good news unless somebody didn't like being there and had something lined up. But outside of that, that's really bad news. But don't underestimate the impact of that news on somebody that potentially staying on.
Absolutely. Which leads me on to beautifully onto our next question. So you've given us loads to think about retaining and rebuilding trust and how high performance teams work together. And obviously, if businesses wanted to book team building events or days, they can book them with you via Gateway HR. But if businesses wanted to improve their employee engagement or teamwork themselves, what would be your kind of top do-it-yourself recommendations for how?
Yeah, you're quite right. Obviously, after coming to us and getting you to do it brilliantly for you, but of course, no. Listen, the best tips here. Think about when are people most engaged? What is it that engages people in work? And I don't know whether everybody was here. I won't go over old stuff because there's a lot of new stuff today. But I think the last time during the early part of lockdown, of course, we talked about motivation.
Yeah, we did.
And I think I said, I'm going to remind you again, just a little comment from that is that, people do work well and hard because they want to, not because they're told to. To any authoritarian dictatorial managers that think that's the way, I'm not so sure. Measure it over a long period of time. So I would say within your team working, create scenarios, situations, and workshops and activities that involves everyone. If people can own what they're doing and completely understand why and have a say over how they do it, when they do it, maybe they can set their own performance goals. Now, you might think, oh, you're mad, Graham. Listen, don't tell anybody outside of this room, but of course, I let people think that they've set performance goals all the time. And you know what I'm talking about there. Have a little think behind that. It's about being clever. listen, sometimes the bottom line defines the performance goal for us, doesn't it, in private business? Sometimes, you know, the requirement of the government to provide a particular level of service in the public sector or emergency services defines what we need to do. But it's not about the end result, it's about the journey. And if you want to engage people in that journey, for me, DIY sort of, if you like, quote this great phrase, you know, team building exercises are about thinking about the list at the start. What I would get people to do, I'd run an exercise, and I always do something very similar, is really, really early on, give people the freedom to just discuss and talk to each other without leadership involvement, and get them to consider what excellence looks like in the world of great teams. Think of the best team they know, whether they're thinking currently with, you know, so ladies hockey, netball or something, England hockey, the All Blacks, Liverpool in the football, whether it be a business that they've worked with, a leadership team that they've worked with, get them to think about that and start to come up with a list of what was present, much like the list on the slide that you can have. You know, there's a starting point, and it's about saying, so this is a list, and then really have discussions, open discussions about what that looks like, what some of the challenges will be. And when we've got clarity around what that is, then ask them truthfully, get them to compare, where is it that we need to be different? Where is it that we have to change? Where's the gap? What are we bad at? And you won't be surprised. People will start to really open up, and there's so much information there. And here you go, here's a challenge to any business leaders. When you create a team day like that, make sure they're the last person to talk. It's a tough ask, but I will give Emma a due, who's on here. So yeah, Emma's there. We did a team, I ran a team day with Gateway a couple of weeks ago. First time, you know, good time to do it, of course. Great time to do it. I didn't talk to Emma beforehand, but I was really impressed because, you know, we worked together for a long while from a coaching relationship. And I was really impressed with the freedom that she gave everybody to speak, and the restraint she showed in actually offering her thoughts. But this is me, this is my business. But these are the people that would deliver it for you. And if you want people, your question was, how do you engage people? You involve them, Eloise. You involve them in the process. You involve them in the decision making. If you want them to own what they do and take responsibility, if you want them to buy in, hang on a minute, I'm sure I showed a model that did this. If you want them to be held accountable, then we have to get them to buy in. We have to get them to agree and disagree. We have to get to a point where we step over a line and move forward on that day. And if they're involved in that process, then I believe they're more likely to do that.
Brilliant. We've got lots of nodding heads in the gallery view that I can see of people going, yes, yes. And I think that's what it's all about, isn't it? If people feel that they're listened to, if they feel they're involved and they've got an opinion, and you know, and they're sharing and they're part of something, then they will want to perform at their best for that business and for that team. So
sorry, just quickly, there's something else that just made me think of. I just wrote down, there's one of my favorite quotes, actually. I'll give you at this point. There's an industrialist called Andrew Carnegie who once gave a great quote for me, and I love it in leadership. It said, in my epitaph, it will read, "Here lie a man who was wise enough to surround himself with people greater than I." And I think that's just such a great sort of poignant thought for top leaders. You know, and what I would say there is, when you're developing, the reason we should involve everybody is because think about why you have a team in the first place, which is what we started with today, to remind ourselves. And actually think about, where is the skill? Where's the information in this team? It's actually with the people. It's the people that will deliver the performance. That's the skill. You employ them for a reason because of their skills. You employ the reason for their expertise. So if you want high levels of engagement, why don't you involve them in the planning process? Why don't you actually show them? And the trust comes from saying whether you're going to do it and not fluffing if you don't, because they know. Don't think we're being clever, right? They know. All right, but if there's logic behind why we can't, even if they disagree, my experience says they'll accept it to a degree. Okay, sorry, yes, just a thought process there.
No, I think that's a great way to end, Graham, because you've summed everything up. You know, we trust is not, it's not something that you can build quickly. It takes time, and teams working together really well takes time as well, doesn't it? So it's about putting in the good foundations and then getting people to get used to being back together again.
Yeah,
and
I think being patient.
Yeah,
Being patient and giving them forum to get back together and remind them what that's about. And I think the quicker, you know, you find, I think, you know, any time invested in little activities, start of the day, little workshops that can just remind people. And we have like little board games that we use at Gateway, you know, when we're doing team stuff. And it's incredibly innovative in its thinking. It's like a 5-10 minute thing that just reminds people how important that teams are. And I think if you could do that, and I would urge you to do that, then you should. But you're right, time and consistency is the only real way to build trust. You know, you need to be your authentic self over a long period of time. People will trust you.
And going back to right at the start, like you said, about communication. So making sure we're just constantly communicating with people.
Yeah, communicate. And on that note, can I just take the opportunity before you go off just to communicate? Yeah. Obviously, you know, I appreciate that time's difficult. I appreciate that money's up. Of course, we know that, you know, and training is what it is. Anybody in the world of training, of course, pretty much has that to develop really fast. But I want to take the opportunity. I thank you for asking me again. Really,
pleasure, and thank you for joining us.
It's just sharing, you know, sort of 3 or 3.5 decades now of working in teams in many, many ways. So it's great just to share my thought. It doesn't mean I'm right, but it's an opinion based on quite a lot of doing rather than just reading. So that's where I come from. I think one thing I would say is if you know anybody, either yourselves or in your organisation, you know, one thing that Gateway HR has done, and certainly me and Emma have led on, is I don't think I'd ever been on a Zoom chat before we went into Bradley. I don't think I did. I never did. And now we're running workshops on it. So there you go. That's resilience and development. One thing that we have done is that we've started to do taster sessions. You know, so we run CMI stuff and teamwork. So we just started to do taster sessions. So please look on Eventbrite for everybody and share it with anybody that you know, or come and join us yourself. If you want to learn a bit more about coaching and mentoring, then please, we do these, say, absolutely free. Book onto that, give it to as many people as you know, and exactly the same for leadership and management. And our next official CMI level 3 qualifications in coaching and mentoring, and then leadership and management. Coaching and mentoring begins in September. So I just wanted to get that out. So book on 3 taster sessions, spread the word. Come and spend 2 more hours with us, but there's a lot more discussion on them. It's not just me chatting. All right, thank you.
That sounds good. I think Emma's actually, if she hasn't already, which I'm sure I have seen them on the HRHuddle Facebook group, so you should see them on there. But I'm sure she regularly puts reminders on there for us. So, but thank you for mentioning that, Graham. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Graham, for your wisdom. I'll send the recording out over the next few days. But if you've got any questions for myself or Graham, I'll make sure that Graham's contact details are on the recording as well when I have to send it out. He'll be happy to speak to anybody. But if you have any ideas for future topics, anything that you're finding challenging or any kind of pain points that you've got at the moment, things that you'd like us to get a guest speaker on, then or just to have an open debate on, then please email me and let me know. But thank you everybody very much for joining us, and I will see you very soon.
Lovely to see you all. Have a good rest of the week. Thanks, Eloise.
Thanks, Graham. Take care. Bye. Bye.